Hello, Virgo. Uh, Welcome back to Virgo. Okay, so silence has been doing damage between you and someone who matters. And they're starting to realize that continuing to protect themselves through not speaking is costing more than honesty ever could. There's a conversation coming that's been building pressure for weeks, maybe months. The kind where someone finally stops managing their words and just says what's true. And when that dam breaks, when all the things they've been holding back come rushing out, it's not going to be gentle or edited or easy to hear. You can feel it already, can't you? That thickness in the air between you. This person has been rehearsing, going over it in their head while they're driving, while they're trying to fall asleep, while they're in the shower, imagining your face, predicting your responses, trying to find words that will make the truth less brutal, less exposing, less likely to destroy what you have. But there are no perfect words for what needs to be said. There's just the saying of it, the ripping off of the band aid, the acknowledgement that things haven't been real between you because one or both of you has been performing instead of being. Some of you already know what this is about. You've been waiting for them to say it out loud, waiting for confirmation of what your gut has been screaming. And the waiting, that limbo of knowing but not knowing, of suspecting but not having proof, it's been its own kind of torture. There is a sense that this conversation will involve apology, real apology, not the performative kind. The kind where someone says, I see what I did. I understand how it hurt you. I take responsibility for the damage I caused. And hearing that after weeks or months of being made to feel like you were overreacting or imagining things or being too sensitive, it might break something open in you that you didn't know was still frozen. Because validation after gaslighting hits different. Having someone finally admit they were wrong after they spent so long convincing you that you were the problem, that's not just relief. That's vindication. That's proof that you weren't crazy, that your intuition was right all along. And while that validation feels good, it also means facing how much time you wasted doubting yourself instead of trusting what you knew. This reflection invites you to consider, if someone confirmed what you've suspected but they've denied, would the validation be worth the pain of having been lied to? It's possible this talk involves confession, them admitting feelings they've been hiding, attraction they've been pretending didn't exist, love they've been too scared to claim. And if that's what's coming, if they're about to tell you they've been wanting you while acting like they didn't, you need to decide right now how you're going to respond. Because in the moment, when someone finally says what you've been hoping to hear, it's easy to just melt into relief without asking the harder questions. Like, why did it take this long? Why did they make you feel crazy for sensing what was there? Why is honesty only happening now that circumstances forced it? What changed that made truth less scary than continued lying? There's also the possibility that this honesty is going to hurt. That what they need to tell you isn't, I love you, but I can't do this anymore, or I've been seeing someone else, or I never felt what you thought I felt. And if that's the truth that's coming, if you're about to have your worst fears confirmed, then you need to ground yourself now. Before it hits, before you're sitting across from them, hearing words that will change everything and trying to hold yourself together while your world reorganizes around this new unwanted information. It can seem as if you've been living in one reality and you're about to be shown it was all fiction, that the relationship you thought you had was based on lies or omissions or wishful thinking. And that displacement, that sudden shift from what you believed to what's actually true, it's disorienting in ways that make you question everything. Not just about them, about yourself, about your judgment, about what else you've been wrong about. Some of you might need to be the one who initiates this, who finally says, we need to talk about what's really happening here, because they're never going to do it on their own. They're too comfortable in the ambiguity, too protected by the not saying. And if you want truth, if you need clarity more than you need to preserve their comfort, then you might have to be the one who forces the conversation they've been avoiding. And that takes courage, because you might not like what you hear. You might get confirmation of things you'd rather not know. You might have to face that this person isn't who you thought they were, that what you have isn't what you believed it was, that the future you imagined isn't actually possible. This reflection invites you to consider, what question are you most afraid to ask, and what keeps you from asking it? There's something about timing here that feels urgent, like this conversation has a window, and if it doesn't happen soon, the opportunity will pass, the courage will fade, the moment will be lost. And then you'll both go back to whatever uncomfortable equilibrium you've been maintaining, pretending things are fine when they're not, living in the gaps between what's said and what's meant. Um, and maybe that's what's been happening all along. You've been having this conversation in pieces, in fragments, in coded language and subtext, and things left unsaid. And what needs to happen now is for someone to just say it plainly, to stop talking around the thing and talk about the thing. To risk the discomfort of directness, because the alternative, this endless dance of almost saying, is worse. It may feel as though you need to prepare a defense, to plan your responses, to figure out how to protect yourself from whatever they're about to say. But what if instead of preparing defense, you prepared presence? What if instead of planning what to say back, you just decided to really listen, to let them speak their truth fully before you react to it, to give them space to be as honest as they're capable of being without immediately making it about how their honesty makes you feel? Because here's what happens in difficult conversations. Someone starts to say something hard, and the other person interrupts with their reaction, with their hurt or anger or justification. And then the person who was trying to be honest shuts down, decides it's not safe, goes back to protecting themselves. And the truth that was trying to emerge gets buried again. Some of you might discover in this conversation that you've both been lying, that it's not just them who's been dishonest, that you've had your own silences and omissions and things you haven't said because saying them felt too risky, and recognizing that shared responsibility, that mutual participation in the dishonesty, it might actually make the conversation easier, might create a sense of, we're both human, we've both been scared, let's try to do better. Or it might make it harder, because if you're both confessing to ways you've been less than real, then you have to decide if you can build something authentic from here, or if the foundation is too compromised to keep building on. This reflection invites you to consider, what have you been withholding that would need to be spoken for this conversation to be truly honest? There's a particular kind of relief that comes after difficult truth gets spoken, even when the truth is painful, even when it changes things in ways you didn't want them to change, because at least you know. At least you're dealing with reality instead of living in the exhausting space of managing what might be true. At least you can stop pretending, stop performing, stop editing yourself to fit what you think they want or need or can handle. It can seem as if this conversation, as scary as it is actually the doorway to something better. Not necessarily to staying together or fixing what's broken, but to being real, to operating from truth rather than from fear or protection or carefully maintained image. And that realness, even when it's uncomfortable, is what makes actual intimacy possible. Um, you should also know that honest conversations don't always lead to resolution. Sometimes they just lead to clarity. And clarity about incompatibility or misalignment or ways you can't meet each other is valuable even when it means the end of something, even when it confirms that what you hoped could work actually can't. Because staying in something that doesn't work, investing more time and energy into connection that's fundamentally flawed, that's just postponing pain, making it bigger, making it harder when it finally does end. So, if this conversation reveals that you and this person aren't right for each other, if their honesty or yours or both makes it clear that continuing doesn't make sense, try to receive that information as a gift, as redirection, as the universe or life or whatever you believe in showing you that your energy needs to go elsewhere, that your heart needs to be available for something different, something that actually works instead of something you keep trying to force. Some of you might be tempted to avoid this conversation, to keep things surface level, to not rock the boat, to maintain the status quo even though it's killing you slowly. And I understand that impulse. I understand the appeal of familiar dysfunction over unknown possibility. But here's what avoidance costs: your peace, your self respect, your ability to trust yourself, your capacity for real connection. And those are prices too high to pay for the illusion of stability. So, if this conversation is trying to happen, if the pressure is building, if you can feel that something needs to be said, don't run from it. Don't minimize it. Don't convince yourself you can keep managing the discomfort of not knowing. Lean into it. Create space for it. Be brave enough to hear what needs to be heard and say what needs to be said. This reflection invites you to consider: what's the worst thing that could be said in this conversation, and could you survive hearing it? There's something about aftermath that matters here, too, because the conversation is just the beginning. What happens next? How you both show up after truth has been spoken, whether words lead to changed behavior or just temporarily relieve guilt. That's what actually determines whether honesty was useful or just another form of manipulation. Words without action are just performance. Apologies without changed behavior are just ways to get you to stop being upset. Confessions without follow through are just unburdening that leaves you holding weight that was never yours to carry. So, as you move through this conversation, as you hear what they need to say and say what you need to say, pay attention to what comes after, to whether honesty leads to transformation or just creates a brief moment of vulnerability before everything goes back to how it was. It may feel as though this conversation will determine the future of your connection. And maybe it will. Maybe what gets said will make it clear whether you can move forward together or need to move forward separately. But try not to put that much pressure on this one exchange. Try to see it as just one conversation in what will hopefully be many, as a beginning of honesty rather than a final reckoning, as practice in being real with each other, even when it's hard. Because if you can do this, if you can sit with uncomfortable truth and not destroy each other in the process, that's actually a sign that maybe you can make it, that maybe you have the foundation for something real. But if this conversation reveals that honesty between you leads to cruelty or defensiveness or shutdown, if you can't be vulnerable with each other without it becoming a weapon, then you have important information about whether this connection is actually viable long term. Stay grounded, stay present, and remember that you deserve relationships where honesty is normal, not exceptional, where truth is the foundation rather than the exception. And if this person can't offer that, if they can't be real with you even when it's uncomfortable, then they're not your person. And that's painful, but it's also clarifying. And clarity, even painful clarity, is always better than confusion. You're ready for this. Even if you don't feel ready, you've survived harder things, and you'll survive this too. And maybe, just maybe, what's on the other side of this honesty is something better than what you have now. Something real, something worth the discomfort of getting there.